For 5 years, 68-year-old Kora endured her daughter-in-law, Dena's constant disrespect. She bit her tongue through the eye rolls, the dismissive comments, the way Dena treated her like an unwelcome guest in her own home. But this Mother's Day, when Dena called her the Shrew, right in front of her grandchildren, Kora had finally had enough. What Dena didn't know, she and her husband had been depending on money that Kora secretly controlled, money that could disappear with a single phone call. By sunset on Mother's Day, Dena learned exactly who held the real power in this family. What happened next shocked everyone, including Kora herself. Before we get into today's story, don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories that celebrate the strength and wisdom of women like you. Tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Share your experience in the comments. Kora Brown stood in her kitchen, rolling out biscuit dough on the same wooden counter she'd used for over 30 years. The morning sun poured through the window above the sink, warming her shoulders. Her hands moved without much thought, flour dusting her knuckles, the smell of bacon curling through the air, coffee bubbling in the pot behind her. She wore a faded blue apron with tiny embroidered flowers, the one her late husband, Dale, had given her one Christmas long ago. The peonies she'd clipped that morning sat in a mason jar on the table, blooming white and pink like they always did in May. She hummed an old gospel tune her mother used to sing as she cut neat circles in the dough. "Happy Mother's Day," she whispered to herself, her voice soft. This day had always been important to her, not for the gifts or the cards, but for the chance to gather. She'd worked hard to make her little home in Boonville feel like a place her family would want to return to. Her son, Trent, was coming with his wife Dena and their daughter Kaylee. They hadn't been by in a few months. Life got busy, she knew. But still, it meant something to her that they were coming today. She moved through the living room, fluffing the couch pillows and wiping a fingerprint off the edge of a picture frame. Family photos lined the mantel. Trent's high school graduation, Kaylee's first birthday, a faded photo of Kora and Dale dancing in their yard. The lace tablecloth was already set, real plates, cloth napkins, and a small pitcher of sweet tea chilled in the fridge. Kora glanced at the clock. It was just past 10. By 10:30, the smells from the oven filled the house. Biscuits golden, eggs soft and fluffy, fresh fruit arranged in a big white bowl. She lit a vanilla candle and placed it near the window. At exactly 11, she heard tires crunch on the gravel drive. Kora wiped her hands on her apron and peeked through the curtain. Trent stepped out of his gray truck, tall and a little tired-looking. Dena came around from the passenger side, sunglasses on, hair slick and styled like she was headed to a photo shoot, not a backyard brunch. Kaylee jumped out next, her curls bouncing as she ran toward the porch. Kora opened the door with a big smile. "Well, happy Mother's Day, Dena," she said, arms open for a hug. Dena leaned in with one arm, barely touching her. "Hi, Kora, you look relaxed." Kora blinked. "Well, it's a special day. Figured I'd stay in my Sunday best," she said with a chuckle, patting her apron. Trent stepped forward, kissed her cheek. "Smells good in here, Mom." Kaylee ran right past them, her eyes on the table. "Grandma, can I have a strawberry?" "Of course you can, baby," Kora said, grinning. She reached out and gently brushed a leaf from Kaylee's hair. Dena set her purse down on the bench in the entryway and glanced around. "You know, you could really brighten this place up if you knocked out that wall," she said, pointing toward the kitchen. "Makes a house feel more modern." Kora gave a polite smile. "I kinda like the way it is. It's home." Dena shrugged. "Well, to each their own. It's just real lived in here." That word stuck with Kora, but she didn't say anything. She led them into the dining room, where the food was still warm. They sat down. Kora poured everyone some coffee and juice, and for a while, things were almost normal. Trent asked about the dogwood tree in the backyard. Kaylee giggled over a butterfly that landed on the windowsill, but Dena barely touched her plate. She picked at the eggs, scrolled her phone under the table, and sighed a few too many times. "So how's the health clinic, Trent?" Kora asked, trying to stir a little conversation. "Still short-staffed, but I'm hanging in there," Trent said. Dena rolled her eyes. "He's always hanging in there. Never says no to anything at work. We haven't had a proper weekend in months." "Well, he's always been a hard worker," Kora said, reaching over to pass Kaylee the jam. Dena cut in, sharp but quiet. "Yeah, it runs in the family, doesn't it?" Kora blinked. She didn't know what to say to that, so she turned her attention back to Kaylee. "Kaylee, sweet pea, use your napkin now. You're getting jam all over your face," she said gently. Dena snapped, her voice low but firm. "Let her be. She's fine." Kora reached for the napkin anyway, dabbing Kaylee's cheek. "Just don't want her getting sticky." Dena's fork clinked hard against her plate. "You know, Kora, this is exactly what I mean. You're always fussing. You come across as bitter, overbearing even." The room went quiet. Kora froze, her hand still holding the napkin. She looked at Trent, but he just kept chewing, eyes on his plate. Not a word, not even a glance her way. Her chest felt tight, and for a second it was hard to breathe. She looked at Kaylee, still smiling, jam on her chin. She smiled back, but her heart wasn't in it. Inside, something cracked. Not loud, not angry, just quiet and deep. And for the rest of the meal, Kora barely said a word. The house felt quiet again after they left. Too quiet. Kora stood by the sink, hands resting on the edge of the counter. The dishes could wait. She stared out the window, watching dust dance in the sunlight. In the distance, the gravel had already settled from Trent's truck, pulling away. She walked into the living room, pausing in front of the fireplace. Her fingers traced the edge of the photo of Trent and Mitch fishing by the old lake. Trent was just a boy then, 10 years old, smiling with both hands, holding up a fish too big for him. Mitch had one arm slung around him, proud as could be. That was the last summer they had together. Mitch passed that October. It happened fast. One night, he came home from work, pale and tired. A month later, he was gone. Some kind of infection they couldn't stop. Kora never fully understood the medical side of it, even though she worked at the hospital herself. It didn't matter. The outcome was the same. She sat down on the couch and let herself feel it for a minute. The kind of ache that doesn't go away, just settles somewhere deep inside. Back then, she didn't have time to fall apart. Trent needed her. The bills didn't care that she was grieving. The roof still needed patching. The heater gave out that winter, and there was barely enough left over for groceries some months. She went back to work full-time, just 2 weeks after the funeral. Her job at the county clinic turned into overnight shifts, sometimes doubles, and every holiday on the calendar. She traded sleep for paychecks and worked extra when anyone else called in sick. The nurses joked that Kora was the one holding the place together. Maybe she was. There were times she'd come home so tired, she'd forget where she left her keys, or walk into the hallway and just stand there for a minute, trying to remember what she went to get. But Trent never saw that. She made sure of it. He always had a hot meal, clean clothes, and someone in the stands at his school events. Even if she had to nap in the car between shifts just to make it, vacations weren't a thing in their life. While other families went to the beach or to Dollywood, Kora packed sandwiches and took Trent to the local lake for the day. They made up games. She taught him how to stretch $1 so far, it squeaked. Looking back, she didn't mind it. She was proud of what they had. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. Eventually, Trent graduated, got into a good college. Kora cried in the parking lot after they dropped him off. She'd taken out a personal loan and dipped into her savings to help with his tuition, promising herself she'd catch up later. She never really did. At first, she thought Dena was good for him. Smart, funny, full of plans. Always talking about opening her own business, a wellness boutique or something like that. Kora didn't quite get the details, but she smiled and nodded. She was happy Trent had someone. Then the favors started. It was little things at first. A few $100s for rent when they were short, a loan to fix the car, help with baby supplies when Kaylee came along. Kora gave without hesitation. She wanted them to have what she didn't. She wanted to be the kind of mom and grandma that made life easier, not harder. But what was supposed to be temporary became routine. Every time she thought things were smoothing out, another request came in. Dena's business needed a website, then a consultant, then new marketing gear. There was always something, always just this one time. Kora transferred the money, told herself it was just part of being there for family. But months turned into years, and the thank yous stopped. She picked up a frame from the shelf, one of her and Trent, on his college graduation day. He had his arm around her shoulders, his cap tilted crooked. She was smiling so wide in that photo. It felt like another lifetime. Back then, she thought everything she poured into him would come back around, not in money, but in closeness, in respect, in care. But now he barely called, unless something needed fixing or funding. Dena didn't visit, unless it was Mother's Day or Christmas. And even then, she came like she had a timer set, always checking her phone, always commenting on how small or quaint the house was. Kora set the photo down and looked around her home. It was old, sure. The wallpaper in the hallway was faded, and the floor creaked in spots. But it was hers. Every inch of it had a memory stitched into it. She'd worked too hard for too long to feel like a guest in her own space. She walked over to the small desk by the window, where she kept her bills and notebooks. She opened the drawer, pulled out a worn check register, and stared at the totals. Month after month of transfers, payments, birthday money, school fees, business help, groceries, rent. She flipped through pages filled with amounts and dates that blurred together. Kora didn't know exactly when helping had turned into enabling, but it had. And now she was tired, not just physically, tired of being expected to give without question, tired of feeling like love had to be proven with money. She closed the book slowly. Maybe it was time to look at things differently. Maybe love didn't mean saying yes every time someone asked. Maybe it meant knowing when to stop. Kora sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun sliding across the floor. Her second cup of coffee had gone cold. A quiet hum from the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. She had pulled out her spiral notebook, the one where she kept a rough list of what she'd given over the years. It wasn't meant to be a tally. At first, it was just to stay organized. Who needed what, when, and how much. But now, looking at the pages, it felt like something else entirely. She flipped through slowly, her pen resting on the table. There was the $600 she'd sent when their old Toyota broke down. Then the $1,200 for Kaylee's preschool fees. Then the monthly rent help, which had started at $400 and crept up to $850 over time. Sometimes it was groceries. Sometimes it was a quick loan for a client Dena needed to impress. Kora even remembered buying a high-end blender because Dena claimed it was essential for her smoothie business. That blender probably hadn't been touched in months. She opened her online banking and started going line by line. The totals made her stomach turn. It didn't seem like much at first, but added together, month after month, year after year, it was more than she'd realized. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, 6 years of saying yes. She scribbled down the final number and sat back in her chair. $183,470. Kora stared at it. Her hands were still. Her breath caught for a second. She'd worked her whole life, saved carefully, gone without, just to build something safe. And it had gone out of her account like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was her safety, her future. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't move at first, but then stood slowly and picked it up. One missed call from Trent and a voicemail from Dena. She hesitated before hitting play. Hey Kora, hope you're doing okay. So, rent's coming up again, and we're in a bit of a pinch. Again. Could you go ahead and send that over tonight? You know how it is. That's what moms are for, right? Appreciate it. Talk soon. Kora stood there, the phone still in her hand. That's what moms are for, Dena had said, like it was automatic, like it was owed. Kora sat back down at the table, the air suddenly heavy. Her finger hovered over the screen. As she opened her banking app, she clicked on the scheduled payment that sent the monthly rent to Trent's account. A little blue button sat at the bottom of the screen. Cancel transfer. She stared at it. Her chest was tight. Not from fear, more like realization. She thought of all the times she'd skipped the things she wanted. The bathroom remodel she kept putting off. The trip to Oregon she used to dream about. The new glasses she'd needed last year, but settled for patching the old ones with glue. She thought about how each transfer came with less and less gratitude. About how she had become more of a wallet than a mother. How her love, which had always been steady and quiet, now felt taken for granted. She hit cancel. The screen flashed, confirming her choice. Kora let out a slow breath. Her hand rested flat on the table. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just sat there in the stillness, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. She looked around her kitchen. The wallpaper was old. The curtains needed washing, and the faucet dripped every now and then. But it was hers. Every dent and scratch in the place had a memory attached. And none of those memories included begging for help or playing games to keep someone's favor. Kora whispered under her breath, "Not anymore." She stood up, went to the sink, and poured the cold coffee down the drain. Then she made a fresh pot, not because anyone else was coming, but just for herself. She pulled the biscuits from earlier out of the bread box, popped them in the toaster oven, and opened the back door. The sun was still warm. The breeze carried the smell of fresh-cut grass. She stepped out onto the porch with her cup and sat in the old rocker Dale built before Kaylee was born. The birds chirped nearby. She could hear the distant sound of someone mowing 2 houses down. She sipped her coffee slowly, feeling the warmth of it settle in her chest. Kora knew there would be calls, probably angry ones, maybe guilt-tripping, maybe silence. But she also knew she couldn't keep emptying herself to fill everyone else. It wasn't about money, not really. It was about being seen, being valued, being respected, as more than someone to lean on, only when things got tight. She rocked gently, the old chair creaking beneath her. Today something shifted inside her, a quiet but certain shift. She didn't know what would happen next, but she did know one thing for sure. She was done handing over her piece, and that was enough. By the next morning, the calls had already started. Kora's phone buzzed twice before she was even out of bed. She didn't pick up. She stared at the screen, watching Trent's name flash, then disappear. A few minutes later, it buzzed again. This time it was Dena. Then came the texts. "Trent, hey mom, did the rent transfer bounce? Not sure what happened." Dena. "Kora, the rent's late. We need that payment today. You always send it by the 1st. What's going on?" Kora sighed. She sat on the edge of the bed, the covers still pulled halfway up. She didn't respond. Not yet. She wasn't ready to explain something she'd barely had time to sit with herself. By lunchtime, the tone had changed. "Dena, we have late fees now. This is really inconsiderate, Kora. We're counting on you." "Trent, can you just call me? We need to talk." Kora kept her phone on silent and set it face down on the counter. She walked into the yard and pulled weeds from the flower bed along the fence. The soil was dry. She filled her watering can and gave the peonies a good soak. She needed air. She needed space to think. But even as she tried to focus on the garden, her mind wandered. She thought about how quickly help turned into a habit. How every time she said yes, they expected it the next time too, like it was automatic, like it was owed. That evening, she made herself a plate of leftovers and sat in front of the TV. She tried to focus on the evening news, but her phone buzzed again. Then it dinged with a notification from Facebook. Her stomach sank before she even opened it. Dena had posted something. It's hard when someone you care about starts acting like a stranger, especially when they've always been the rock. Watching someone lose their grip is heartbreaking. Please keep our little family in your prayers during this confusing time. No names, but everyone knew who it was about. Kora closed the app and set her phone down. Her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. The nerve of it. She hadn't even said anything yet, and now she was being painted as unstable, as the problem. The next day, her phone rang again. This time it was Delma, an old friend from the quilting circle. Kora, honey, I just saw something online. Are you all right? Is everything okay? Kora took a slow breath. I'm all right, Delma, thanks for checking. I don't want to pry, Delma said gently, but folks are talking. Dena made it sound like you're not doing well. I'm doing just fine, Kora replied, her voice steady. Well, if you need anything, you call me. You hear? I will, I promise. After she hung up, Kora sat at her kitchen table, her eyes falling on a small ceramic rooster on the windowsill. It had belonged to her mother. She reached over and picked it up, running her thumb along the chipped edge. Her mom had been tough, kind, but firm. She always said, if folks don't like your no, they probably didn't deserve your yes to begin with. There was a knock at the door. Kora opened it to see Miss Geneva, standing there with a small paper bag. I brought you a few muffins, she said, and I wanted to see how you're holding up. Kora smiled and stepped aside to let her in. That's sweet of you. Geneva sat at the table, placed the bag down, and looked Kora straight in the eye. Did you really cut off the payments? I did, Kora said simply. Geneva let out a soft laugh. Good for you. Kora raised her eyebrows. You don't think I'm being cruel? Honey, Geneva said, leaning forward. You've been carrying them like an extra mortgage. That girl's out here living off your kindness, and now she's crying about it online. That's not how grown folks act. Kora nodded, a small lump forming in her throat. You've got every right to draw a line, Geneva added. It doesn't make you a villain. It makes you a woman with a backbone. Kora didn't say anything right away, but she felt something ease in her chest, just a little. After Geneva left, Kora went outside and sat on the porch swing. The air was cool, the sky starting to turn that soft peach color it always did before sunset. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and rocked gently. She thought about the phone calls, the posts, the whispers already beginning around town. But she also thought about what it meant to reclaim her life, to decide what she would and wouldn't be part of anymore. There was a storm coming, that much was clear. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel powerless. She felt steady, and she was ready to stand her ground. Kora had just finished folding laundry when her phone rang. It was Trent. Hey Mom, Dena and I were wondering if you'd come by the apartment on Saturday, he said. We thought it might be good to talk everything out, just, clear the air. She paused. Who's gonna be there? Just a few folks? Nothing big, just family. Kora didn't ask questions. She knew what it was. Not a talk. A setup. Still, she agreed. She wasn't one to run from her own family. Saturday afternoon came, and she got dressed in her pressed slacks and her favorite blue sweater. She brushed her hair back neatly and put on a bit of lipstick. She looked at herself in the mirror. The lines were deeper, the silver brighter, but she saw strength in her reflection. She grabbed her purse and made the drive into town. Trent and Dena lived in a new apartment complex, clean sidewalks, trimmed hedges, and glass doors that felt cold and modern. She rang the buzzer. The door clicked open. Dena answered, stiff smile on her face. Glad you could make it. Kora stepped inside and looked around. The living room was crowded. On the couch sat two women Kora had never seen. Friends of Dena's, both dressed like they were headed to brunch. On the other side of the room, her cousin Marla was there with her husband Tenny. They both looked awkward, like they hadn't been told the full story. A woman from church, Miss Elsie, stood in the corner sipping water. She gave Kora a quiet nod. Trent hovered near the hallway, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Kora sat down in the only empty chair. Dena cleared her throat and stood near the fireplace. Her voice had that soft, careful tone people use when they want to sound concerned. "First, I just want to say this is coming from a place of love," she began. "We've all noticed some changes in Kora lately, pulling away, acting different. And now with the money being withheld, we're just worried." Kora looked around the room. Most eyes were on her. Dena continued, "It's like she doesn't trust us anymore. She used to be so involved, so helpful, but now it's like she's pushing us away. And I hate to say it, but it's gotten to the point where we have to wonder, does she need help?" Kora folded her hands in her lap. She didn't flinch. Dena kept going. "She's always had a strong personality, but lately it's become controlling. And now, with no warning, she's pulling financial support and refusing to speak to us about it. I mean, we have a child. This affects all of us." Kora looked at Miss Elsie, who was now frowning slightly. She looked at Marla, who wouldn't meet her eyes. When Dena finally sat down, the room went quiet. Everyone was waiting for Kora to explain herself, maybe to apologize. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small folder. "No fuss, no drama. I'm going to say this once, and then I'm done," she said. She opened the folder and took out a few papers. "This is a copy of every transfer I've made to Trent and Dena's account over the last 6 years. Rent, groceries, car repairs, startup costs, over $180,000, all from me, quietly, with love." She looked up. "I didn't ask for it back. I never held it over anyone's head. But I also never expected to be treated like a stranger in my own family." Dena opened her mouth, but Kora held up her hand. "I'm not finished," she continued, her voice steady. "I've babysat, I've cooked, I've bent over backwards to make everyone comfortable. And when I asked for a little respect on Mother's Day, I was called bitter. I didn't yell, I didn't make a scene. I just went home and thought about what my life's become." She let the silence settle in before speaking again. "I'm not angry," she said, her tone soft but firm. "I'm just done giving everything and getting nothing in return. I didn't cancel the money because I'm spiteful. I did it because I've been running on empty and no one noticed." Trent looked down at the floor. Miss Elsie crossed her arms. "I didn't know it was like that." Marla finally spoke. "You gave them that much?" Kora nodded. One of Dena's friends shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I mean, that's a lot." Dena stood up again, trying to save face. "That doesn't mean you have to embarrass us in front of everyone." Kora stood too, calmly. "This isn't about embarrassment. This is about truth. You called this meeting. I just brought the facts." Trent finally spoke, voice low. "I should have stepped in. I should have said something that day." Kora gave him a long look. "Yes, you should have." She picked up her purse. "I'm not looking for pity. I'm not trying to make a scene. I love my family. But I also love myself enough now to choose peace. I hope one day you'll understand that." Without waiting for anyone to respond, Kora turned and walked to the door. As she stepped outside into the sun, she felt something shift. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet freedom. For once, she wasn't the one explaining or apologizing. And it felt good. The next few days were still. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits, just silence. At first, it felt strange. Kora kept checking her phone out of habit, expecting another message or missed call. But there was nothing. And slowly, she stopped checking. The house, once filled with the buzz of obligation, was finally quiet. No one asking for anything. No one needing an urgent favor. No one twisting her love into something they could cash in. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt like space, like room to breathe. Kora got up early one morning and drove into town. She walked into the community center and put her name down as a volunteer at the food pantry. They were short on help, especially on Thursdays when deliveries came in. The work was simple: sorting cans, bagging produce, handing out meals. But it gave her purpose. Folks there greeted her with smiles, not needs. That felt good. On her second week, a young woman named Tisha asked Kora if she'd always lived in Boonville. Since I was 21, Kora said. Bought a house on Maple Street with my husband, raised a boy there. Tisha smiled. I like your energy. You calm people down just by being around. Kora chuckled. Never heard it put like that, but I'll take it. When she got home that afternoon, she went up to the attic and dug around until she found her old easel and a box of paints. The brushes were stiff, but nothing a little soaking couldn't fix. She cleared out the sunroom and set everything up by the big window. The light in the late afternoon was just right, soft and warm. She hadn't painted in over a decade, not since Trent was in high school, but the first stroke on the canvas felt familiar. Her hand moved slower than it used to, but it felt good. Like finding a part of herself she'd put away without meaning to. That week, she painted the peonies in her garden, then a simple landscape of the hills outside town. She wasn't trying to make art to impress anyone. She was just painting for herself. In the mornings, she sat on her porch with a cup of coffee and watched the birds pick at the feeder. She started baking again, too. Simple things: cornbread, banana bread, a peach cobbler that made her whole house smell like summer. She dropped off slices to Miss Geneva and left a tin for Delma down the road. One afternoon, she got a call from Willeen, an old friend she hadn't seen in years. I heard through the grapevine you finally told them. No, Willeen said. Kora laughed. Word sure gets around. Good for you, Willeen said. Want to come by for cards this Friday? Just a few of us ladies. I'd love that. That Friday night, she sat at a card table in Willeen's den, laughing over spades and slices of pound cake. They talked about their knees, their grandkids, and that one preacher who always forgot half the names in the church bulletin. Kora drove home feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Each day brought a new kind of quiet. Not the silence of people cutting her off, but the stillness of not chasing after people who only showed up with open hands. She realized how much energy she had spent worrying, stretching herself thin, trying to be everything to everyone. That kind of giving didn't just drain your bank account. It chipped away at your spirit. Now she had time to sit in her garden and listen to the wind move through the trees. She noticed the way the light changed through the kitchen window at 3 p.m. She'd start a load of laundry and let herself rest while it ran, instead of trying to fill every moment with something useful for someone else. The silence gave her space to think about what she really wanted, not just what was expected of her, and that wasn't something she'd allowed herself to consider in years. She began keeping a little notebook on the counter, not for bills or reminders, but for small joys. She wrote down things like morning sun on the porch, finished a new painting, Geneva's laugh, no one asked for money today. It wasn't that she didn't love her family. She did, but she loved herself too, and that love had been waiting patiently for her to notice. Kora stood on her porch one evening, the air cool and sweet. She looked up at the sky, streaked with orange and purple, and rocked slowly in her chair. She wasn't lonely. She was at peace. She'd always thought quiet meant being forgotten. Now she knew better. Quiet meant freedom. It was just after midnight when Kora was jolted awake by a loud knock at the front door. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding. For a second, she thought maybe she'd imagined it. But then it came again. 3 firm knocks, followed by silence. She reached for her robe and slippers, her body stiff from sleep. The hallway was dark, and the air felt cooler than usual. She flicked on the porch light and peered through the curtain. Dena. Her hair was messy, pulled back in a loose knot. She had no makeup on, and her eyes looked puffy. She wore sweatpants and an oversized sweatshirt that hung off one shoulder. Her arms were wrapped around herself like she was holding her body together. Kora opened the door just a few inches. Dena. Dena looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Can I come in? Kora stepped back and nodded. All right? Dena walked in slowly. glancing around like she was expecting someone else to be there. She sank onto the couch without being asked, her hands trembling slightly. Kora sat in the chair across from her, waiting. For a while, Dena didn't speak. She looked down at her lap, twisting the edge of her sleeve between her fingers. Finally, she said, "I didn't know where else to go." Kora nodded. "What's going on?" Dena let out a shaky breath. "The business, it's done. I shut the website down last week. I couldn't keep up with the payments. Credit cards are maxed out. I borrowed money from a friend, but now she's threatening legal action. Trent's been sleeping in the guest room for days. He doesn't say much, just comes home, eats, and disappears." She wiped at her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. "I'm scared, Kora. I don't know what to do." Kora leaned forward slightly. "Have you told Trent everything?" Dena shook her head. "Not the worst of it. He knows the cards are bad, but not how bad. I just kept thinking I could fix it if I had more time. Or more help." Her voice cracked on that last word. There it was. The unspoken request, now hanging in the room between them. "I need help," Dena said. "Just enough to get back on my feet. A few thousand. I swear I'll pay it back. I'll make it right. Please." Kora looked at her. She saw the fear, the exhaustion, the desperation. But underneath it all, she saw something else too. Patterns she'd seen before. The same cycle of asking, promising, and depending on someone else to catch the fall. Kora folded her hands in her lap. "Dena, I'm truly sorry things have gotten this bad. I know it's scary. I've been there too, more times than I care to count." Dena opened her mouth to speak, but Kora raised her hand gently. "I'm not giving you money." Dena's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not saying no because I don't care," Kora said calmly. "I care a lot. But this isn't just about a payment. It's about learning to take responsibility. About facing what's real, even when it's ugly." Dena sat in stunned silence. "I can help you find a credit counselor," Kora continued. "I know folks at the food pantry who work with women in situations just like this. I'll drive you. I'll sit with you. I'll even help watch Kaylee if you need time to get things straight." She paused, then said clearly, "I'll help you stand, but I won't carry you anymore." Dena blinked. "You think I'm a failure, don't you?" "No," Kora said, her voice soft. "I think you're finally facing your own life. That's not failure. That's the first step toward changing it." Dena stared at the floor. "I didn't mean to let it get so out of control." Kora nodded. "I believe you. But now it's yours to fix." For a long time, neither of them said anything. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Outside, a breeze rattled the front screen door. Dena eventually stood, slow and unsure. She wiped her cheeks with both hands and pulled her sweatshirt tight across her chest. "I guess I should go," she said. Kora stood too. "You don't have to disappear, but you do have to do the work." Dena nodded once. She opened the door, then paused on the porch. "I don't know where to start." "Start by being honest," Kora said. "With Trent. With yourself. It's not easy, but it's the only way out." Dena looked back at her. "You really won't help with the money." "No," Kora said, firm but kind. "Because that kind of help has never actually helped." Dena didn't argue. She just turned and walked down the steps. Her shoulders slumped, her steps slow. Kora watched her disappear into the night. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel cold either. What she felt was something in between, a strange mix of sadness and hope. The door clicked softly behind her as she locked it. She stood for a moment in the quiet hallway, the smell of peonies still faint in the air. Kora knew Dena hadn't left happy, but maybe, just maybe, she'd left with something better. A seed planted, something to grow from. That was enough for now. The sun was already rising high over the hills when Kora stepped outside and stood on her porch, coffee in hand. The peonies were in full bloom, pink and full just like last year, but today felt different. It was Mother's Day again. A full year had passed since the brunch that changed everything. She looked out across her yard, where the grass had just been cut, and her flower beds were neat and colorful. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze. The quiet didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt earned. Kora had made peace with her choices and herself. She turned when she heard a car pull into the driveway. Trent stepped out of the driver's side, and Kaylee came running up the walk with a big grin and a bouquet of wildflowers in her hand. "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma." Kora smiled and opened her arms. "Well, look who's grown a foot taller." Kaylee hugged her tight. Behind her, Trent carried a paper bag with a pie and a small envelope tucked in the side. "Hi, Mom," he said with a nervous smile. "We thought we'd stop by a little early." Kora waved them inside. "Come on in. I've got lemonade in the fridge and a strawberry cobbler on the counter." As they sat at the table, Kora noticed the change in Trent. He looked more relaxed, tired still, but not as weighed down. They talked easily about school, work, and how Kaylee had won second place in her art contest. After they finished their pie, Trent handed her the envelope. "It's from Dena," he said. "She wanted you to read it. She thought it might be better that way." Kora opened it slowly. Inside was a handwritten note, not typed like before. "Dear Kora, I've thought a lot about everything that happened. I know I caused hurt and frustration. I said things I shouldn't have, and I leaned too hard on someone who had already given so much. I started therapy last fall. At first, it was hard to face myself, but I'm learning how to stop blaming others. I want you to know, I'm working on it. I'm trying to be better, not just for Trent and Kaylee, but for myself too. I'm truly sorry. Thank you for not bailing me out that night. You forced me to face the truth, and I needed that more than I realized. Happy Mother's Day. You deserve peace and happiness." Dena. Kora folded the letter and placed it in the pocket of her sweater. She didn't speak for a moment, just sat there, feeling the weight of the words sink in. "Thank you," she said softly to Trent. He nodded. "She means it." Later that afternoon, after they left, Kora stood in her sunroom and looked at her travel books. She'd been circling dates, making lists, and checking weather forecasts. She had finally booked that trip to the Oregon coast. 2 weeks in the fall, her first real vacation in years. She was going to see the Pacific Ocean, stand by those rocky cliffs she'd only read about. She even splurged on a room with a view and a train ride through the mountains. It felt good to do something just for herself. As the sun dipped lower, she took her tea out to the porch and sat in the swing. The same porch where she'd once sat, wondering if she'd made a mistake by saying no. The same place where she'd cried, prayed, and questioned if she was doing the right thing. Now she felt none of that doubt. She rocked gently, watching the breeze rustle the tall grass. The flowers swayed without fuss. The quiet filled the space around her, and it didn't ask for anything. She looked down at the card Kaylee had made by hand, crayons and glitter. It read, "Happy Mother's Day, Grandma. You are strong and kind and fun." Kora smiled. Not a sad smile, a full one. She had set boundaries, and while it had been hard, it had brought clarity. Real love, she realized, wasn't about stretching yourself thin. It wasn't about sacrificing your joy just to keep others comfortable. It was about knowing your worth and expecting others to honor it too. She whispered to herself, just loud enough to hear it on the wind. Real love isn't about giving until you're empty. It's about knowing when to stop. She rocked a little more, her heart calm. And now, to those of you watching, I want to ask, have you ever had to set a boundary that others didn't understand at first, but it saved your peace in the end? Tell me in the comments. Let's talk about the moment you chose yourself. If this story spoke to your heart, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about courage, healing, and second chances. From my porch to yours, Happy Mother's Day.